Welcome to this 365 Freedom Strategy session. Today, we're breaking down the mechanics of the delivery skeleton and why your addiction to speed is your biggest operational bottleneck.
Yeah, it's a huge issue.
I mean, imagine you're running a marathon, right? But
Yeah.
every single mile, someone steps onto the course and just hands you a heavier backpack.
Oh man, yeah. That sounds awful.
Right, you're pumping your arms faster, your heart rate is spiking, you're sweating through your gear, but your actual mile time is getting worse and worse.
Because of the weight.
Exactly. You are doing way more work to cover, like less ground. And that is the exact physiological and operational reality of how most people are running their businesses right now. We sort of conflate this feeling of exhaustion with the reality of progress.
Yeah, we really do. And, it's an operational trap. It stems from this fundamental misunderstanding of physics as it applies to knowledge work.
Okay, how so?
Well, we tend to think of the brain and our business systems like a basic engine, right? Like you put in more gas, you go faster. But it actually behaves a lot more like the thermal dynamics of a computer processor.
Hmm.
If you overclock a CPU without upgrading the heatsink, you don't actually process more data.
Right, it just gets incredibly hot.
Exactly. The processor just generates this immense amount of heat, and the system throttles your performance to prevent a fire.
Yeah.
And, eventually the motherboard literally melts.
Wow, so we're basically melting our own motherboards.
Pretty much. We
Yeah.
are burning up our internal circuitry because we refuse to acknowledge that motion is not direction.
That brings us to the core structural concept we really need to pull apart today, which is the delivery skeleton.
Yes.
The skeleton.
And I want to be clear, this isn't just some abstract, corporate buzzword. The delivery skeleton is the literal mechanical framework of how you or your organization take raw effort and turn it into a finished deliverable product or service.
Right, it's the structure. Exactly. And if you want to understand why overclocking the system destroys it, we have to look at the anatomy of the skeleton. We need to identify the bones and, probably more importantly, the joints.
The joints are crucial, yeah.
Let's make this incredibly concrete for everyone listening. How does a delivery skeleton function differently across varying business models? And, where does the heat actually build up?
Okay, yeah. Let's look at three distinct architectures to see how this plays out in reality. Let's take a solo consultant first.
Okay, a solo operator.
Right. The bones of their delivery skeleton are the hard assets and standard operating procedures. So, it's their core intellectual property, their diagnostic frameworks, their proposal templates, the software stack they use to schedule calls.
The stuff that doesn't really change.
Exactly. Those are rigid. The joints, however, are the connection points where the value actually transfers.
Okay, give me an example of a joint.
So the joint is the handoff between a 30-minute discovery call and the drafting of a custom statement of work. It's that transition from gathering client data to synthesizing that data into an actual strategy.
Right. So for the solo consultant, if they're obsessed with speed, they might cram 8 discovery calls into a Tuesday.
Oh, yeah. People do that all the time.
Right. They are generating velocity. But the joint, that synthesis of the proposal gets incredibly rushed.
Yeah, because they have no time between calls.
Exactly. So they miss a nuance the client mentioned in passing, or they send out a boilerplate proposal instead of a custom one, and they end up losing a $50,000 contract just because they wanted to finish their inbox to-do list by 5 p.m.
Yeah, the joint just failed under the pressure.
Exactly.
Now, if you scale that up to a SaaS startup, their delivery skeleton is highly complex. The bones of the code base, the AWS infrastructure, the customer support ticketing protocols, the UI design system.
A lot more bones.
A ton of bones. But the joints are the API calls between different microservices. They're the communication loops between the development team pushing a new feature and the marketing team trying to explain that feature to the user base.
Right. So when leadership demands that a release happen 3 weeks early just to beat a competitor to market.
They're forcing the skeleton to sprint.
They're sprinting, yeah. And when a complex system sprints before it's actually stabilized, you get this vibration we hear so much about.
The dreaded vibration, though.
The developers take shortcuts in the code, which creates technical debt. The marketing team writes copy that doesn't quite match what the feature actually does.
And then customer support gets slammed.
Right. The customer support team isn't trained on the bugs that inevitably ship with the rushed code. The entire skeleton is just vibrating with friction.
And that vibration is the key indicator of impending structural failure, because friction generates heat. and heat degrades materials.
Just basic physics.
Right. You see it in a creative agency, too. Their bones are their design software, their client briefs, their rendering hardware. But their joints are the feedback loops.
Like client revisions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A client asks for a revision. The account manager has to interpret that request, translate it into a language the designer understands, and then the designer has to execute it without losing the soul of the original concept.
So if the agency is prioritizing speed and volume over, like, structural integrity.
The account manager just forwards the client's messy email directly to the designer. No translation.
Oh, designers love that.
Right. The designer gets frustrated, executes exactly what is written instead of what the client actually needs, and the project goes into, like, 4 extra rounds of revisions.
So rushing the joint actually quadrupled the time the task took.
Exactly. It slows everything down.
Okay, sure. In a sterile vacuum, that makes perfect logical sense. You know, build a sturdy skeleton, respect the joints, don't overheat the CPU. But I have to throw reality at this for a second. If I am a listener right now, and I have a competitor who just raised a Series B, and they're launching 3 new features a month.
Yeah.
Or if I'm a consultant watching my peers outmarket me on every single channel, slowing down to tighten the bolts on my operations, it feels like a death
It
sentence.
feels like you're losing.
Yeah, it feels like managed decline. How is slowing down not just letting the market pass you by?
I get that fear. I really do. But it's because you're confusing velocity with momentum.
Okay, unpack
In a
that.
competitive market, momentum is the only thing that actually kills the competition. Velocity is just speed. It's distance over time. But momentum is mass times velocity.
Mass times velocity,
Right.
okay.
You can generate a tremendous amount of velocity by stripping all the weight and substance out of your work. You can ship buggy code fast. You can publish shallow marketing copy fast, but it has no mass.
So it hits the market and
It
just...
makes zero impact. It bounces right off.
Frantic motion is basically burning fuel in neutral.
I like that. Burning fuel in neutral.
Yep.
Yeah. When you actually construct a solid delivery skeleton, your work gains mass. When you ship a feature, it works flawlessly, the users adopt it instantly, and the support tickets stay at 0. That is momentum.
Because it's heavy and directional.
Exactly. It's compounding. Your competitor rushing out 3 broken features a month is creating a massive liability for their future selves. They're literally shaking their own chassis apart.
They're generating technical and operational debt that will just eventually bankrupt their calendar.
Precisely.
To ground this, I want to look at a highly specific operational postmortem from a founder who fell directly into this velocity trap.
Oh, this is a great case study.
Yeah, it really is. We're talking about an entrepreneur who ran an experiment on their own pacing. They documented a week where absolutely everything was operating at maximum speed.
Just redlining the whole time.
Redlining, yeah. They were checking Slack, drafting emails, tweaking copy, jumping on Zoom calls. The sheer volume of their activity was staggering. But their takeaway was, honestly, chilling.
What do they say?
They wrote, I finished days exhausted but unsatisfied.
Wow.
Yeah. We need to unpack the biological and psychological mechanism behind that exact feeling. Why does an 8-hour day of hyperfast execution leave us feeling like we accomplished literally nothing?
Well, it traces back to a principle in cognitive psychology known as the Zeigarnik effect.
The Zeigarnik effect. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Back in the 1920s, a psychologist named Bluma Zeigarnik noticed that waiters in a cafe could remember complex, unpaid orders perfectly.
Right.
But the moment the bill was paid, they forgot what the people had eaten. She basically proved that the human brain retains information about uncompleted tasks much more readily than completed ones.
That makes a lot of sense, actually.
Right. Unfinished tasks take up active RAM in your brain. They run in the background, constantly pinging your working memory to remind you that the loop isn't closed.
So when this founder is frantically task switching, when they start an email, get interrupted by a Slack ping, switch to a spreadsheet, take a phone call, and then try to go back to the email.
They're forcefully opening dozens of cognitive loops without closing a single one of them.
Jeez. That sounds exhausting just thinking about it.
It is. Your brain is a biological processor, and it has a finite amount of working memory. So by 3 p.m. on a day of frantic rushing, your brain is holding on to the unwritten paragraph of a proposal, the tone of a slightly passive-aggressive client email, the forgotten calendar invite, and, the unreviewed data set.
No wonder they felt exhausted.
Exactly. You're exhausted because your brain is dedicating massive amounts of metabolic energy to keeping those open loops alive in your working memory. Your battery is draining at an accelerated rate just to maintain the chaos.
And the unsatisfied part of that equation, because they said exhausted but unsatisfied, that has to be a lack of a neurochemical payoff, right?
Exactly. When you actually complete a meaningful task, when you close the loop, your brain releases a hit of dopamine.
Right, the reward chemical.
Yeah, it's the biological reward for finishing the hunt, for securing the resource. It's signaled to your nervous system that you can relax for a moment.
Okay, so if you're rushing from task to task,
You never fully complete the hard things because you're too busy doing the fast things. You deny your system that dopamine. You get all of the metabolic exhaustion and literally none of the neurochemical reward. You are starving your brain of the very chemical it needs to feel a sense of progression.
which perfectly explains the breaking point. This founder reached a state of total operational failure. Massive input of effort, zero output of finished value.
Yeah, complete stall.
And the pivot they made is fascinating because they didn't collapse into a 2-week vacation because they burned out.
Right.
The postmortem states, I intentionally slowed my pace. The word intentionally carries so much weight there.
It really does.
They chose to stop the frantic motion while still sitting at their desk. But for a high performer, choosing to pause feels like physically uncomfortable. It feels unnatural. Why does stopping the frantic motion feel like an existential threat?
It feels like a threat because it shatters the illusion of performative busyness.
Performative busyness.
Yeah. In modern knowledge work, it is incredibly difficult to measure actual value creation on an hour-by-hour basis. So we've substituted motion for value.
Right. I'm busy, so I must be productive.
Exactly. If your calendar resembles a Tetris board, if you are replying to emails within 3 minutes, if you're visibly sweating over your keyboard, you signal to yourself and to the market that you are important and productive. The speed basically becomes a shield
A shield against what?
against the terrifying reality of the map.
The map.
Yeah, like your actual strategic direction. When you are rushing, you never have to ask yourself, is this task actually moving the needle?
You don't have time to.
Right, you do not have time to question your strategy because you're entirely consumed by the tactics of execution. But when you intentionally pause, the motion stops, the shield drops.
And you have to actually look at what you're doing.
You are suddenly forced to look at your delivery skeleton in stark lighting. And for many entrepreneurs, pausing forces them to confront the fact that they've spent the last 6 months working 80-hour weeks on a product feature nobody actually wants.
Ouch.
Or marketing to a demographic that will never convert. The speed was hiding the fact that their strategy was fundamentally flawed.
Wow. Speed often hides anxiety. That is the pivotal realization from this founder's experience. We use velocity to outrun our operational insecurity.
Absolutely.
But this isn't just a psychological phenomenon, right? This has severe cascading effects on human biology, which in turn destroys the business from the inside out.
Yes, the biological tool is huge.
We have to treat the nervous system as an operational tool. I mean, if your servers were overheating, you wouldn't ignore the alarms and just run more data through them.
Of course not.
But we do that to our bodies constantly.
We do. And the biological cost of that anxiety is immediate and measurable. When you are operating from a place of rushing, because you feel behind, because the to-do list is crushing you, your nervous system does not differentiate between the threat of a missed deadline and the threat of a physical predator.
Wait, really? A deadline and a tiger are the same to the brain?
To the amygdala, yes.
Right.
It perceives the urgency as a literal survival threat and hijacks your system. It floods your bloodstream with adrenaline and cortisol. It triggers the sympathetic nervous system into a state of fight or flight.
Let's look at what fight or flight actually does to the cognitive machinery required to run a business. Because it doesn't just make you feel stressed, right?
Sure.
It physically changes how your brain processes data.
Dramatically. Cortisol is designed to prioritize immediate physical survival over long-term strategic thinking.
Okay.
When that chemical hits your brain, it actively suppresses the prefrontal cortex.
And the prefrontal cortex is the rational part.
Right. It's the evolutionary marvel right behind your forehead, responsible for complex problem-solving, emotional regulation, empathy, nuanced decision-making, and long-term planning.
So basically everything you need to do your job.
Basically, every single cognitive tool you need to be an effective leader, writer, coder, or strategist is taken offline.
Wow.
Simultaneously, your vision and focus narrow. It's a biological phenomenon called cognitive tunneling. You lose peripheral awareness so you can focus entirely on the tiger jumping out of the bushes.
I think about it like trying to read a highly complex fine print topographical map while sprinting at top speed through a dense forest.
That's a perfect analogy.
Right. You are holding the map, but your eyes cannot track the contour lines because your body is literally bouncing. Your brain cannot translate the abstract symbols into a route because all of its processing power is dedicated to making sure you don't trip over a tree root and die.
Exactly. Keep moving to stay alive.
All your brain knows is keep moving. The tragic irony is that in modern business, the map is the only thing that actually matters. But we are all sprinting too fast to read it.
Which means you are never actually present for the work in front of you. When you're sprinting through the woods, you aren't focused on the map in your hands. Your mind is a mile ahead, worrying about the destination.
You're living in the next task.
You're mentally living in the next task. And when you are completely detached from the present moment, operating with a suppressed prefrontal cortex, the inevitable result is errors.
You make mistakes.
Big ones. You write sloppy code. You misread the tone of a vendor's email and send an aggressive reply. You fail to notice a critical typo in a legally binding contract.
And those errors are the friction that degrades the delivery skeleton.
Exactly.
The mistake happens. The client gets angry. You have to stop what you are doing tomorrow to fix the mistake you made today. That creates a bottleneck.
And the bottleneck delays the next project.
Right. The delay triggers more anxiety, which spikes your cortisol even higher, which suppresses your prefrontal cortex further, guaranteeing you will make an even bigger mistake on the next task.
It's a terrifying, self-replicating loop of operational degradation.
Which is why the founders' intervention was so critical. They didn't just try to organize their tasks better, they fundamentally changed their physiological state.
Yes.
The documentation reads, "I worked more deliberately. I took breaks without guilt." And that phrase, without guilt, is the linchpin of this entire strategy. Slowing down is not a surrender.
No, not at all.
Slowing down is not quitting. Slowing down is refining how the machinery works. Let's attack this concept of the guilt-free break because this is where the theory hits a brick wall for most operators.
Oh, absolutely. People hate taking breaks.
Right. We have this deep-seated, almost ancestral guilt when it comes to resting during work hours. We assume that if the machine isn't making noise, it's broken.
That is the hangover of the Industrial Revolution. We spent a century measuring productivity by physical output over time.
Like widgets produced per hour.
Right. If a worker on an assembly line stepped away, the conveyor belt stopped and the factory lost money. The metric of success was continuous, visible, physical motion.
Yeah.
But we have blindly mapped that industrial framework onto knowledge work, where the primary tool of production is the human brain.
And you cannot run a cognitive engine at the red line continuously.
Yeah.
If you are operating a heavy industrial diamond-tipped drill cutting through solid steel and you do not pause to let the bit cool down,
It's gonna fail.
the friction will generate so much heat that the metal of the bit will warp, shatter, and become utterly useless. Pulling the drill bit out of the steel for 60 seconds isn't wasting time.
It's not a luxury.
Right, it is the mandatory non-negotiable maintenance required to ensure the tool actually survives long enough to finish the job.
That is the exact paradigm shift required to eliminate the guilt. You must stop viewing a break as a reward for finishing a project or, as a sign of weakness.
It's an operational imperative.
Yes. A guilt-free break is an operational imperative. When you step away from the keyboard, when you take a walk without your phone, you are allowing the cortisol to flush out of your bloodstream.
You're cooling the drill bit.
You're letting the prefrontal cortex come back online. You are cooling the drill bit. You are ensuring that when you return to the task, your delivery skeleton has the structural integrity to execute flawlessly.
I want to push on this again, though, because the pressure from the outside world doesn't care about your drill bit.
Very true.
When a client is screaming for a deliverable or an investor wants the quarterly report by noon, stepping away for a guilt-free break feels irresponsible. How do you defend that pause when the external deadlines are absolute?
You defend it with math.
Yes. Okay.
And this brings us to the most counterintuitive discovery of the founders' entire experiment. They implemented these deliberate pauses. They stopped the frantic task switching. They cooled the engine.
And what happened?
The result completely defied the logic of the industrial mindset. The founder noted, "The strange part was this. I still completed what mattered. I just felt calmer doing it. Slowing down did not reduce my output. It improved the quality of my focus."
Wow.
The math dictates that slower, deliberate input does not result in lower output, because quality of focus is the only true multiplier of time.
This is the operational physics we really have to internalize. We
Yeah.
spend absurd amounts of capital and energy trying to hack our time.
Oh, all the productivity hacks.
Right. We buy complex product management software, we build intricate Zapier automations, we listen to podcasts on 2x speed, all trying to shave 3 minutes off a process. We treat time as this linear resource to be squeezed.
Yeah.
But if you execute a task with deep, uninterrupted, biologically regulated focus, you only have to do it once.
Precisely. If you rush it, you are guaranteed to do it poorly.
Yeah.
You make the fight or flight error.
You make a mess.
You misconfigure the DNS settings on a new website because you're trying to do it while on a conference call.
Yeah.
And what happens next?
The website goes down.
The website goes down. The client panics. You have to drop everything, spend 3 hours on the phone with hosting support, identify the error, fix it, and then spend another hour writing an apology email to the client to save the relationship.
So rushing a 15-minute task just cost you 5 hours of your life and damaged your reputation.
Exactly. Slower pacing means clearer thinking, which means zero rework.
It's the ultimate application of the measure twice, cut once philosophy, but applied to cognitive architecture.
Yeah.
Like if you were a master carpenter building a custom cabinet, taking an extra 45 seconds to measure a piece of expensive walnut a second time feels slow on the front end.
But it guarantees the joint fits flawlessly.
Right. Rushing is the equivalent of measuring 0 times, grabbing a chainsaw, and just hacking away at the wood in a panic, hoping the pieces eventually look like a cabinet.
It's a disaster.
Yes, you cut the wood faster, but when the doors don't close, you have to throw the entire thing in the dumpster, drive back to the lumberyard, spend more money, and start from scratch.
And when we translate that master carpenter approach back to the delivery skeleton, we understand why the founder experienced a massive reduction in friction.
Smooth edges.
Yes. When you complete a task from a place of calm, deliberate focus, the edges of that task are smooth. The code is documented. The design files are organized and properly labeled. The client communication is clear, setting accurate expectations.
And because the edges are smooth, that task slots perfectly into the next joint of the delivery skeleton.
Handoff to the next team member is seamless.
Calm work lasts longer. That is the compounding reality. Frantic work creates liabilities, it creates technical debt, emotional debt with your team, and just operational messes that someone has to clean up later.
And it's usually you cleaning it up.
Right. When you work slowly and deliberately, you are building an asset. You're constructing structural integrity that does not require constant repair. The high-quality work you do on Tuesday becomes a rock-solid foundation that actively accelerates the work you do on Wednesday. You aren't just saving time, you are multiplying it.
Which brings us to the operational mandate for you, the listener. We have diagnosed the illusion of speed. We've traced the thermal dynamics of a vibrating delivery skeleton.
We've mapped the biological hijacking caused by cortisol.
And we've proven mathematically that quality focus is the only way to multiply time. Now we have to apply this to the immediate reality of your workday. The strategy session demands that you step back and architect your big picture.
And you cannot architect a skyscraper while you are frantically mixing cement in the basement. You must stop moving to see the terrain.
You have to pause.
The challenge laid out in the analysis is fiercely specific, and it's designed to short-circuit the anxiety of the modern professional. The directive is, choose one task today to do more slowly and with intention. Let that be enough.
Let that be enough.
We need to analyze the immense psychological weight of that phrase, let that be enough. It's a total rejection of the way we have been conditioned to work.
It is a radical boundary. The anxiety-driven to-do list operates on a metric of volume. It whispers to you that your worth as an entrepreneur or a professional is strictly correlated to how many boxes you check off before midnight.
Yeah, that 11:59 p.m. panic check.
Exactly. Let that be enough. Completely severs that correlation. It introduces the theory of constraints into your personal psychology. It dictates that executing one critical, high-leverage action exceptionally well is mathematically superior to executing 20 trivial tasks poorly.
But let's look at the friction of implementing this. I'm sitting at my desk right now. I have a digital to-do list with 47 items on it.
Realistically, maybe even more.
Probably more. There are unread Slack messages, proposals to review, invoices to send. If I look at that mountain of obligations and say, I am only going to choose one thing, do it slowly, and let that be enough, the panic is instantaneous.
Sure, because the other 46 items are screaming at you.
Exactly. How do you practically isolate one task without feeling like the rest of the business is burning to the ground?
You utilize business physics to find the bottleneck. You don't just pick a task at random. You audit that list of 47 items, and you look for the root node.
The root node.
Yes, you look for the single piece of the delivery skeleton that, if fundamentally repaired and strengthened, makes the other 46 tasks easier, faster, or entirely irrelevant. You're looking for the constraint in the system.
Give me a concrete example of finding that root node. Let's make it real.
Okay, let's say 10 of the items on your to-do list are apologizing to clients about a confusing billing process, sending manual payment reminders, and trying to reconcile mismatched invoices in your accounting software.
Painful, but very common.
The frantic operator tries to do all 10 of those tasks as fast as possible to clear the list.
Just power through the emails.
Right. The strategic operator stops, looks at the map, and realizes the root node is a broken client onboarding and automated billing sequence. That is the vibrating joint in the skeleton.
So the one task they choose is to completely rebuild the onboarding automation.
Exactly. They ignore the 10 manual apologies for a day. They sit down, they let their nervous system regulate, they bring their prefrontal cortex fully online, and they spend 4 hours deliberately, slowly, and flawlessly mapping and building a new automated onboarding flow.
Doing it right the first time.
They test every link. They refine every piece of copy. They let that be enough. And by doing that one task perfectly, they permanently eliminate those 10 daily manual tasks from their future reality. They attack the root of the friction instead of frantically trimming the branches.
They built an asset instead of managing a liability. They tightened the bolts on the chassis so the vehicle can handle the terrain tomorrow without shaking apart.
Exactly.
It changes the entire paradigm of what a workday is supposed to accomplish. You transition from being a victim of your own chaotic momentum to being the architect of a sustainable system. You are no longer running from the fire. You are building a fireproof structure.
And that requires you to ask the hardest questions of yourself as a leader. You have to be willing to interrogate your own velocity.
Which is exactly what we want you to mull over as we conclude this session. We have laid out the mechanics, the biology, and the mathematics of the delivery skeleton, but the final piece is entirely internal.
It's all about looking inward.
Right. If speed often hides anxiety, what fears are you running from right now in your own daily operations? If you stopped frantically checking off low-leverage tasks, what operational flaws would you be forced to look at?
That's the terrifying part for most people.
It is. Are you afraid that if you slow down, you will realize your current business model isn't actually viable? Are you trying to compensate for a mediocre product by just doing more marketing? What structural cracks are you trying to outrun instead of stopping to fix? Those are the uncomfortable realities that dictate whether you build a lasting enterprise or just exhaust yourself into irrelevance.
Until you stop running, you cannot read the map. And until you read the map, you cannot build anything that lasts.
If you're ready to slow down and architect your big picture, visit 365 Freedom Online to join the community. This has been a 365 Freedom Strategy session.